Hello, and welcome to Conversations Worth Your While, a show in which I chat with authentic, heart-centered experts about interesting topics to spark, inspire, and motivate both personal and professional change. This conversation is worth your while because in the United States, one person dies by suicide every 9 minutes, and around the world, it's every 40 seconds. And also because 25% of people suffer from mental illness. And the other 75%, we care about those people. So if you'd love to help, but you just don't know how, I think this conversation is really going to be worth your while today. I'm Linda Bucher, and I'm a speaker and a master certified life coach. And after living the life of a chameleon and feeling like a victim for 45 years, I finally discovered who I am. I connected with my passion and my purpose, and I reinvented my life to align with my true self. And I've become a happier, more confident, more fulfilled person because of it. But most importantly, this transformation has resulted in me confidently unleashing my gifts to the world. So now it's my honor and my privilege to help you do the same in your life. And today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Frank King. He is a mental health comedian. Yes, you heard me right, comedian, who is making positive ripples in a very unique way because Frank's goal is to save a life a day. So Frank, thank you so much for being with us today. Can you tell us a little bit more about who you are, what you do, how you do it, and why you do it?
Yes, absolutely. I am the mental health comedian. I started comedy the day after Christmas, 1985, 2.5 decades in clubs. Became a professional speaker in 2012. So I went from being a funny speaker to a speaker who's simply funny. Uh, People often ask, a comedian talking about depression and thoughts of suicide, how does that work? Well, it runs in my family. It's called generational depression and suicide. My grandmother died by suicide. My mother found her. My great aunt died by suicide. My mother and I found her. I was 4 years old. I screamed for days. And I myself have come close enough to dying by suicide. I can tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like. Spoiler alert, I did not pull the trigger. A friend of mine came up after a keynote recently and he goes, "Hey, man, how come you didn't pull the trigger?" Like, hey, man, could you try to sound slightly less disappointed?
Yeah.
That's where the humor is in the topic. There's nothing to joke about, but just personal, funny anecdotes. And so I realized I always wanted to make a living and a difference with my humor. I just could never figure out how. Read a book by Judy Carter called The Message of You. She's a friend. She said, read the book, Frank. You'll figure it out. And I went into The Message of You thinking I got nothing. And halfway through, I thought, oh, my Lord, I do have something to talk about. Given my family history, more nuts in my family than in a squirrel turd, and my two mental illnesses and my close brush with suicide, I thought I can keynote on suicide prevention if I get some training, certification, which I've done. And I began keynoting. The second hurdle, I've been a comedian for 2.5 decades. Who's going to take me seriously? So I decided I would do a TEDx talk. And in 2014, I did my first TEDx, first of 11. And I actually came out on stage as depressed and suicidal. Nobody knew. My friends, my family, my wife didn't even know. I've been living with that for 5 decades. And that convinced meeting planners and speakers bureaus, wow, Frank can do something serious. And then another 10 TEDx talks, all on mental health, mental illness, one aspect or another followed, helped me build my brand as the mental health comedian. And that's what I do for a living. I speak on suicide prevention as a workplace health and safety issue. Workplace, by the way, because 80% of people who die by suicide are 18 to 65. And where are most people? Ages 18 to 65 most days at work. That's where it all crosses over.
Right. Well, you're certainly doing very important work in the world. You're making ripples in a really unique way. And, I believe that the situations and experiences that we have do a couple of things. One is they do lead us to our actual true purpose in the world, why we're here. But also, I know people think that experience makes you stronger, but what I believe is it reveals how strong you are. And it was revealed to you the strength that you have and this difference that you can be making in the world in such a unique and very important way. So I'm so grateful that you're here with us today.
Sure. Delighted.
Okay, so At the beginning of this podcast, I gave some statistics that you shared with me. In the US, one person dies by suicide every 9 minutes and every 40 seconds around the world. And also the statistics that 25% of people suffer from mental illness. That's, 1 in 4. And the rest of the other 3, most of them care about someone who suffers. So this conversation is for everybody, because the hard thing for people, the other 3 who care about the 1 in 4, who's suffering from mental illness, we'd love to help, but we just don't know how. And I know you have some really, good things to share with us today. The first place that, we can feel, disconnected, or we don't understand people who don't have mental illness, are the signs and the symptoms. Can you share some things about that?
Yes. The signs of depression. This is not an exhaustive list, but just the top 3 in my mind. One is eat too much or can't eat, sleep too much or can't sleep, have trouble getting out of bed in the morning, so often late for work or school, but rally in the afternoon like they're a different person. And here's one you can observe visually. They tend to let their personal hygiene go. Normally, they're pretty well put together, but today the hair's dirty, the clothes aren't quite so clean. It may be because they're having trouble getting out of bed in the morning to simply shower and run a little wash. The question comes up, what do you say to somebody who's depressed? Well, let's start with what you don't say. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Turn that frown upside down. Have you tried fish oil? At which point I go from suicide to homicide. What you do say is, I'm here for you and I mean it. I know you're not lazy or crazy or self-absorbed. I know that depression is a mental illness. Here's the good news. With time and treatment, things will get better. I'll take the time. I'll help you get the treatment. Now, here's the tough question. You have to ask them in no uncertain terms, are you having thoughts of suicide? There's an old urban legend that you should never mention the S word in front of somebody who's depressed because it might give them the idea. Like it never crossed my mind. Suicide, what a great idea. Why did I think of that? Trust me, it's crossed their mind. As a matter of fact, mentioning it out loud reduces the chances that they will take their life. So let's say they are depressed, and then you ask them if they're having thoughts of suicide. And they say no, but your gut tells you they're circling the drain. How would you know? Well, there are signs. They talk about death and dying quite a bit. You catch them Googling death, dying, or how to die by suicide. Death appears as a theme in their artwork or their music or their writing. They're getting their affairs together, especially if they're giving away prized possessions, because they want to make sure those possessions go to the people they want them to go to when they're gone. Here's a counterintuitive one, very dangerous, I think. They've been depressed forever, and now they're happy for no apparent reason. And you're happy because they're happy. However, they may be happy because they have a plan, time, place, and method. They know the pain is coming to an end. But a lot of people don't understand about suicide. It's not so much about wanting to kill yourself most times. It's about ending the pain. So what do you say to somebody who you think is having thoughts of suicide? Here's what you don't say. You're being melodramatic. Nobody who talks about it ever does it. So here's what you do say. Do you have a plan? If they have a plan, what is your plan? If it's detailed, time, place, and method, you need to do your best to get them to a mental health facility simply for evaluation, find out what's going on, or get them on the phone or texting to 988, the Suicide Prevention Lifeline text line, 988. And if they won't call or text, you do that, and the volunteer on the other end will try to talk the phone into the hand of the person who's in crisis. Now, if they're a danger to themselves in the immediate, or someone else, a danger to someone else, you've got no choice but to call 911. Know that when you do, if the police come and they find they're actively suicidal, they will take them into custody and take them before a judge, and they may end up with a 3-day involuntary hold. And they're going to be mad at you for doing that. They're going to unfriend you on Facebook, but they'll be alive to unfriend you on Facebook. Now, the situation that nobody's ever talked about this in a class I took or a book I've read. Suppose they have a plan, but it's not really detailed. It's kind of nebulous. What would you do? A psychiatrist and I came up with it. I would say, okay, Tell me, you're going to kill yourself? If they say no, then I would say, okay, tell me why not. Make them give voice to whatever's keeping them here, because something is keeping them here. Otherwise, you wouldn't be having this conversation. Family, friends, animals, religion, something is keeping them here. So that's the protocol. The good news is 8 out of 10 people who are suicidal are ambivalent, can't make up their mind. 9 out of 10 give hints in the last week leading up to an attempt, which means, listener, you can make a difference. You can save a life. And you can do it by doing something as simple as what we're doing right here. And that is starting a conversation if you know how. And now you know how.
Mm. That's really very important. Thank you, Frank.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's very true. It's an awkward thing to do. And I can see the fear of, if I talk about it now, I've made it real. And I want to be in denial, right? As the person, I would say, oh no, that person would never do that, because it's too scary and also feels like a big responsibility. Like, this is the reason I think people might shy away from having these conversations.
Yep. I mean, if they say yes, I'm suicidal, they throw that grenade in your lap with the pin pulled. What now? Well, you do your best to get them, take them. Ideally, they will let you take them to a mental health facility for evaluation, or they'll get on the phone or texting to 988. I mean, it is a responsibility. It is, people don't ask, I'm sure, because they're afraid of the answer. So,
right.
But that's, it's odd. I discovered when I was preparing for my first TEDx talk, even though one person dies by every 9 minutes in the US by suicide, hardly anybody talks about it. However, I've discovered if you bring it up, almost everybody has a story. It's almost like they're just waiting for somebody to say the words depression and suicide out loud to give voice to their feelings.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So you have experience that a general psychologist doesn't have, because you've actually, been in that place, place of depression, in that place of wanting to stop the pain. What were the things that you did want to hear? Because you did say, what they don't want to hear. What are the things that you did want to hear?
Well, you and I talked off air about burdensomeness, which is one of the symptoms of suicidality. You feel like you're a burden to the world, burden to your family. The reason I didn't pull the trigger, we had just filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy and lost everything we'd worked for in 25 years in the last recession. My wife was devastated, and I had $1 million life insurance policy. So I thought, I can fix this. I'm a financial burden to her. I'm actually worth more dead than alive. The problem was I had sold insurance straight out of college. I knew most policies had a 2-year suicide clause. If you kill yourself in the first 24 months, it pays nothing. After 24 months, $1 million. So I called my insurance agent and asked him how long I had the policy. And he said 22 months and don't do it.
Wow.
Because he'd had that call. He'd gotten those calls. He delivered checks following phone calls like that. So I couldn't leave my wife not only brokenhearted, but broke. So I had to wait 2 months to kill myself. I don't remember marking the days off the calendar. I don't remember when the 2 months had passed. I guess things got a little better. Bankruptcy went through, phone call stopped. Life got marginally better. So my life insurance ironically saved my life.
Wow. What a story. A story. So that's a really important thing for people to know, to be able to say, you are not a burden to me. I would never, ever be better off without you.
Without you. Yes. Rather than say you got so much to live for, say, I know you're thinking every now and then you're a burden. You are not in any sense of the word a burden to me.
Yeah. What about acknowledging, like, I mean, I'm going to ask you this honestly, because you could say, no, Linda, you're absolutely wrong. Acknowledging that just because you can't see another way out doesn't mean there isn't one. How can I help you?
I think the second part of that sentence, how can I help? I don't think the first part will resonate, especially for young people.
Right.
my cycle of depression is about 3 days. When I start cycling down, I know about 72 hours later I'm going to be cycling back up. So I just sort of hunker down and ride it out. Young people, if they haven't been through that cycle many times, and people with depression tend to think only in the immediate. If it's not going to be any better than this, and I don't think it is, then why bother? So the question is, how can I help? What can I do? It's hard for them to see past today.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. This is really good because for people like me who cannot relate, we want to know what we can do. So what we're talking about today is really having the conversation, recognizing the symptoms, getting over our own awkwardness or our own fears or insecurities and actually having this conversation, recognizing that it is true that we cannot relate. So don't even try that.
Mhm.
Solutions that might work with us if we're feeling down for a few days, which everybody gets,
Sure.
it's not the same thing as you need to say like, oh yeah, I get down sometimes. It's not the same thing. And to ask, how can I help? And to let them know that they are not a burden.
Yes.
What other conversations are in their own head that we can maybe be a part of in a helpful way?
Well, the three-legged stool of suicidality. One is they tend to isolate socially, withdraw from things that they used to do socially that they really enjoyed. Two is they've crossed that barrier. They've decided they can end their lives. And the third is burdensomeness. I think that's the one that you can have an impact on. Join the conversation in their head. I know oftentimes you think that you're a burden to me and the family or whatever. In no uncertain terms, please understand you are not a burden in any way. We would not be in any way better off without you here. I think that's the one thing that you can do. Again, join the conversation they're having with themselves.
Right. Right. Okay. This is a heavy subject. It's such an important subject. And it's very, like people want to be happy. They're in avoidance. They're in avoidance of talking about subjects about this, even about thinking about subjects like this. So I am truly grateful that you've taken the time today, Frank, to, help me understand further, and help the audience. And if there's just one thing that you could leave the audience with today, what would that be?
That 8 out of 10 people are ambivalent, 9 out of 10 give hints. So you can make a difference. You can save a life. And you can do it by doing something as simple as this, and that is starting a conversation if you know how. And now you know how.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Do you have any something you'd like to, a resource or anything you could share with the audience about this?
Yes, I'm a co-author on 4 books on men's mental health, which, by the way, mostly bought by women who have some man in their life we figure they can't quite help. What I'll do is I'll send you a link to the audiobook unabridged of the first volume. They can download that MP3 for free. Beautiful.
Thank you. Send me that link and I will make sure it gets into the show notes. I definitely appreciate that. Well, thank you, Frank, very much for being on Conversations with Your Wild today. And for the rest of the audience, I'm Linda Bucher, a speaker and a master certified life coach, and I'm on a mission to inspire and impact millions of people to know their worth and share their gifts, deliberately creating big, beautiful ripples in the world. And if you'd like to have a complimentary 20-minute clarity session with me, you can get that at lindabucher.com/chatwithlinda. Well, that's our show. Come back next week for another topic, which will help you to learn and grow. And be sure to subscribe and check out other episodes that we have. I'd like to thank Frank King of the Mental Health Comedian, for being here today. And until next time, please subscribe and make sure that you've made this conversation worth your while by fueling the spark that it ignited.